This is a comparison and character mapping between the new Roadhouse from 2024 and the classic one from 1989. If you've seen the original from '89, you obviously love it. Everybody loves that movie. But you probably fall into one of two categories. Either you are excited to see the new 2024 version, or you wish they would have just let it be, because there can be only one. All you have to do is watch the first few seconds of each movie and it's very easy to tell if it's the original or the remake. The original one from '89 opens with a hot girl getting out of a Ferrari Testarossa with a dress that you need two hairdos to wear and the frizzy hair. Walks into a fancy nightclub called the Bandstand, and pretty soon we see Dalton doing his thing. The new one starts with a heavily tattooed pit fighting scene with some cool rock bluesy music in the background, and eventually after the fight, we see Dalton enter. For the main character of Dalton, in the original we had Patrick Swayze, rest in peace, who is in everything from Outsiders and Point Break to movies like Ghost and Dirty Dancing. And in the remake we have Jake Gyllenhaal, yes, Donnie Darko himself. The opening scene includes the first contact with the owner of whatever bar needs to be cleaned up in some faraway land. And in the original, we had Frank Tillman, who owned the Double Deuce in Kansas City. In the new movie, we have Frankie, and she owns the Road House in the Florida Keys, Glass Key specifically. In the first one, the characters aren't afraid of death because it's the Midwest. And in the second one, they're not afraid of death because Florida. We all know Florida man's immortal. In both movies, Dalton pushes back, tries to recommend somebody else. In the original, Dalton tries to recommend Wade Garrett, who's played by the awesome Sam Elliott, and who later becomes a pivotal character in the movie when he joins from his gig in a strip club to help Dalton out at the Double Deuce. In the remake, Dalton recommends Carter Ford, who was the original choice of Frankie and was the tattooed guy in the pit fighting in the beginning. In both cases, Dalton is unwilling to fly. So in the first one, Dalton drives his bad Mercedes all the way to Kansas City, and in the second one, Dalton takes a bus to Glass Key. I'll also note, technology-wise, neither Dalton had a cell phone. Apparently, COVID inflation has not hit this franchise because in the original, Dalton wanted $5,000 up front, $500 a night, and medical expenses. Fast forward 2024, which is actually, carry the 11, 35 years since the original, now it's $5,000 a week for the first month, which is $20,000. When Dalton enters the bar for the first time, music is still being played behind a chain link fence to try to keep the bottles from hitting the band members. In the original, Cody, the lead singer of the band, is actually played by Jeff Healey and is part of the bar staff. And he's actually a friend of Dalton's, and they know each other from the past. In the remake, the first vocalist we see is a hot blonde gal, but that band actually rotates every time we see the stage, and so the bar never seems to have the same band play twice. Since Dalton's new to town, he needs living accommodations. So in the first one, he rents a little apartment above the barn from a guy named Emmett. In the second one, Dalton finds a houseboat for sale that happens to be owned by Frankie, the bar owner, so he ends up living on the houseboat. Now when she tells him that she owns the houseboat and he can live there, she also warns him about the crocodile. This seems strange to me because Florida is obviously known for its gators crawling all over the place, but when I looked it up, apparently crocodiles are found in the Keys. Both movies have a barmaid. In the first one, her name is Carrie Ann, and in the second one, her name is Laura. And both of the barmaids end up bringing Dalton breakfast his first morning after his first night of work. What would an action movie be without its villain? So in the first one, we had Brad Wesley. In the remake, we have a much younger Ben Brandt, who is the lead villain. His father was actually more of a kingpin criminal, but has gone to prison, so we never actually see him in the movie, we just see his spoiled brat kid. In both movies, the villains have their crew of henchmen that do a terrible job of trying to scare Dalton out of town. In Florida, they drive motorcycles because it's Florida. In both movies, the villains have one key henchman, and that key henchman is definitely a level above the other stooges working for him, and more of a closer match in terms of fighting skills to Dalton. In the original one in '89, we had Jimmy, who never smiled, looked mad all the time, but had the cross earring and the bear claw, I assume it's a bear claw, around his neck all the time. The remake has Knox, who's played by Conor McGregor, and this character adds so much more to the movie than Jimmy did in the original. Not only is he the lead henchman and the biggest threat to Dalton, but he just adds so much character. He's got that accent coming through that mischievous smile. He's having a good time watching the world burn, stealing Ferrari, running away from some jealous husband off a balcony, and it just adds a little bit of throwback to that 80s excess as he peels off in his yellow Ferrari. Both movies include a pretty young doctor that becomes Dalton's love interest, and they are introduced because Dalton gets a wound in the ribs and needs patched up by said doctors. In the original, we had a blonde Elizabeth, who was also Wesley's ex-wife, which makes the tension a little bit more between Dalton and the villain. She is also the niece of Red, another big character in the movie. In the remake, we have brunette Ellie, and she is actually the daughter of the local sheriff, who's corrupt, used to work for the big kingpin Papa Brandt, and now works for spoiled kid Ben Brandt. In the original, we also had Wesley's pet stripper Denise, but there is no equivalent character in the new one, probably because there's no strip clubs in Florida. In both movies, we see the Dalton character develop throughout the movie, and in both of them, there's definitely some similarities and a couple differences. In the original, Swayze is very stern, rarely smiles, but not as bad as Jimmy. He's not Schwarzenegger big, but he's definitely ripped, he's disciplined, he's intelligent. In the remake, the Dalton character is still disciplined and intelligent, still been watching his bro science videos and lean, but he's a lot sillier. He's smiling all the time and cracking jokes. So it's a little bit more of a balanced character. In both movies, Dalton starts his day by doing his ninja meditation without a shirt on, just to rub in their body fat to us mere mortals. In the original, there's this background thread that Dalton killed a guy by tearing his throat out. In the remake, there's a background thread of him killing somebody, but in this case, he was a UFC fighter, so you actually see flashbacks of him in the octagon. In both movies, the baddies eventually to take one more extreme step to try to get Dalton to leave town, which, unfortunately for them, only infuriates him and wakes the dragon. In the original, they set fire to both Red's parts store and Emmett's place. In the remake, they set fire to the little glass bookstore, who's run by Father Stephen and daughter Charlie, who Dalton had met in the beginning of the movie. Much like the Miami Vice movie compared to the original series, or the Point Break remake, I think Roadhouse is a decent movie on its own, but will never quite be the original to me. I think all three of them did a decent job of maintaining the basic characters and the basic plot, putting their own original twist on it, and they are decent compared to what else is out there for movie options. But for me personally, I'm always going to prefer that original movie. Admittedly, part of that may just be the nostalgic effect, because I loved that movie when I was younger, and I'm always going to hang on to that. It's actually possible, watching both movies and trying to be objective, that younger viewers that maybe haven't watched Roadhouse or didn't grow up with it may prefer this newer movie with the newer effects and the newer look and better resolution and colors and production quality. It's a very different feel overall between the two movies. Much like the contrast between the Dalton characters, the original movie was more of a darker movie, not just because I feel like there were more scenes in the dark versus the ones more in the light and beaches and scenery of Florida in the new one, but there was also just a general feeling that was darker in the first movie versus more lightheartedness, more smiles, laughter, however you want to say it, in this new remake. The original was just more 80s. It was more graphic. You had things like cigarette smoking. I won't spoil it for you, but I will say that to me, the biggest disappointment between the two movies in terms of the remake versus the original was the end. The remake, in terms of both the showdown between the henchman and Dalton and the ending itself, just did not hold a candle to the original one. In terms of action scenes, they can obviously do so much more now with CGI and all the different camera angles and everything else now versus back in '89. But to me, that made the '89 one seem more realistic. This one, the remake, it did have some pretty cool first-person point of view in the fight scenes that were kind of cool. They did a good job of like blurry vision and those kind of things. But there was no like Matrix arching over backwards in slow motion dodging bullets or anything. But there were scenes that almost felt like they were sped up artificially, and it kind of gave to me a fake look to it. Overall, as much as we all loved the original, I still do feel like this movie is worth a watch. The thing I would say is to watch it as a standalone movie. Just treat it as any other movie you're watching there, because if you get caught up in this comparison like what I just went through, it's going to be harder to enjoy it, and it's just going to make you miss the first one more. But for people that may have never seen the original and watch this one first, you'll probably love it. So whatever your situation is, please comment below when you do watch it and let me know what you think. And I'd be curious when you tell me what you think of the new remake movie. Let me know if you've watched the original, or if you, even better yet, grew up with the original like me. If you haven't done so, please click the button below to subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell for notifications, and check out the YCC merch store to see if there's anything you like.